Don't worry.
And we're live.
Hey everybody, Captain Ron here. By the hair of his chinny chin chin, I just had a little bit of a whirlwind tour to the Middle East, of all places. You may remember, was it 2 weeks ago now, we had one of our followers and students, Sai, on, who hails from India, and he was here he is here in the US on a visa. And circumstances warranted that he has to leave the country, or at least go to a consulate outside the country, and to renew his visa. And those options that would have made him enabled him from doing it from the US have disappeared as a result of COVID. So he needed to fly back. And while he used to fly 3, sometimes 4 times a week for his job prior to COVID kind of did him in, and he developed a fear of flying. And in attempting to go back and renew his visa back, he thought, well, if I got to leave the country, I might as well go back to my own country because it's easier and he's more familiar with it. So he was trying to fly back to India, in a place he told me his hometown, which is about 8 hours away from Bengaluru. Yeah, that's it. And anyway, so I flew with him literally 2 weeks ago today, and he drove up from the Dallas-Fort Worth area with him and his fiance, and we went to you know what? Stop the music. This is Fearless Flight Live, by the way, and this is a place to go if you're afraid. Get to that part. Yeah, if you're afraid to fly, or if you know somebody, or you just want to talk about airlines. Apparently, I want to talk about fear of flying. So anyway, we have our Birds of a Feather group, and I don't know if we're going to announce it tonight, Dieter, but we've got some really exciting things. We've been trying to come up with a way that people could participate with us on a relatively low entrance fee and stay current with us, because the way you get over your fear of flying is not by doing something once, twice, or just when you fly. It's by staying connected, not only with us, but with the community and with yourself. So anyway, the second thing, I'll just throw out a highlight for anybody who hasn't joined our Fearless Flight Birds of a Feather. We highly encourage you to do that. We're well over 1,000 people. Yeah. Yeah, and we're getting lots of that's kind of like we've passed the point where we have critical mass, where it's self-sustaining. In other words, there's always somebody there to be a safe place for you to land if you're new, or if you come back in and want to help somebody. So we highly encourage you to do that. Okay, so I just literally got off the flight here in Phoenix, having returned from India. And to resume where I was 2 weeks ago, I flew with a young man named Sai and his fiance, who came up from Dallas because he had gotten off the airplane about 6 times trying to get on a flight going back to India to renew his visa. And he had a great day. He had a panic attack, one of the most significant. I hesitate to call it the worst, because all of you are in competition. You know, everybody says, was that your worst, Captain Ron? I say, well, no. But anyway, so I won't use that term, but I'll say it was a significant panic attack, and one that I hadn't seen for a while. And we're sitting in the front row so that he could bail before they closed the door. We got through that part, but we got into the flight not more than a couple of minutes, and he's turned and said to the male flight attendant, we could see both flight attendants on the Southwest airplane in our line of sight, and the male flight attendant happened to be looking right at him, and he said, you got to tell the captain that we got to land, he's got to land this airplane. And I quickly decided that my best shot would be to go to the back and pretend like I never knew him. But I didn't. It wasn't time to do that. But I wished I had on videotape the flight attendant's eyes, because, you know, we've talked about this as a group before, you know, how much the flight attendants, how aware are they when somebody has that? And we contend not very, because people hide it typically, which is what Sai had done. But this guy became really under the influence of, what do you do when somebody panics like that? And his eyes got about as big as saucers. And the female flight attendant, to her credit, got up and just said, can I get you something to drink? Would you like ice in it? And he, when we debriefed that, he said that was just enough to break that momentary grip that his anxiety had on him, and he calmed down just a little bit, but he was still pretty upset. And we did the whole breathing into a 6-sack, And that allowed him, in 30 to 40 seconds, he had recovered completely. Really, really did a nice job. It was much easier. He had some insights on the way over. He had a little bit of not a panic attack, but a little bit of a thought when we got on the return flight from Burbank back to Phoenix, and he thought he was going to do pretty well. They drove back to Dallas, got back a day and a half later, and he called me up the third day and said, "How about if you go to India with me?" And I said, "Really?" And it was only 2 days away. So he decided that he still would feel better. And what kept playing in his mind was the whole notion of, that's a long flight, and what if I just have continuous panic attacks? And that, folks, is all the essential elements of anticipatory anxiety. When you just can't put out of your mind the worst possible consequences. So what I ended up doing, or what he ended up doing, was he did a little research and did some studying and stuff. I gave him a couple of resources beyond what he had before, but he still decided he wanted me to go with him. So on last Friday, we all got on an airplane and we went I flew down to Dallas, and we flew from Dallas to Doha and in Qatar. You guys pronounce it Qatar or Qatar?
I've heard Qatar, but
Yeah, I've heard
Yeah,
Qatar
me too.
too.
And I heard both.
Yeah.
So anyway, and then we went, and that was a 15-hour flight, and he did great. And he's going to come back on. He's over in India. He and his fiance are going to stay over, visit family, and get his visa all taken care of, and they're going to come back. But he had unbelievable insight on the way over there, and it really changed me in the way. It gave me more confidence for people like that who absolutely are terrified at the length of a flight. The one thing is, you can't sustain that kind of adrenaline, cortisol production for that length of time. And I've done, oh my God, I got a couple of those suckers. I had my longest flight coming back today from Doha to LA, about 16 hours. And we went right over the North Pole, which is cool. And, but anyway, he did fine. And I'm not going to go into many more details until he comes back on. But what was really touching, he said, "I want to help everybody. Tell me how I can help." So he'll be on here at least to do an interview with us here in next few weeks. And I'm going to get him. Certainly, he's going to be involved more in our Birds of a Feather group and things like that. So, that's what I did. Could talk a lot more about the long haul stuff. I got a really, really good idea what it's like to spend how much? about 46 hours in an airplane between over 5 days. That's a real kick in the butt, the jet lag and stuff. But as it turns out, feeling pretty good. Probably won't have any trouble sleeping tonight, but it worked out really well. So anyway, Diane, Dieter?
I am once
Eric?
again on the road. You can see this is yet another hotel room. And I am in.
Well, we can see it's a room. We don't know unless you have your friendly hotel sign. There you go. Now we got the picture.
Not kidding. And I actually am a flight attendant. I don't have other job descriptions, just saying. I am in Medford, Oregon, and it's cool up here. It's delightful. And I had a nice flight up to Medford from Phoenix. And once again, tomorrow morning, in the glam part of the job, my alarm is set for 3:30 in the morning. Ooh. Because the van is at 4:30 in the morning. And so our flight is shortly thereafter. So once again, to the really fabulous, like Captain Ron's long flight, not everything is just champagne and caviar in first class. Sometimes you have an exhausted flight attendant who's trying her very best to be pleasant to everybody on the flight. But we
Medford, I think Medford is Medford's Tracy Solis's home away from home. I think they have a home up there that she travels. That was part of her reason to get back into flying from Ontario. So
well, we do that, and it's been a long time. I haven't been up to Medford in quite some time. It's real pretty up here. So.
And as Tracy says, it's always great in Southern Oregon.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
It is.
I'll call her tomorrow morning at 3:30 and
That
see
would
if
include
I
3:30 a.m., right?
3:30.
Yeah, yeah. And what did you do over the summer, over the weekend, Eric?
Nothing as exciting as you guys. I'm not working. I am getting ready for travel, but that's not important. I'm nervously looking around. I'm dog sitting my brother's dog, my nephew, who's not quite as pliant as Rocco and about 50 pounds. So if you hear a rip and bark, I've so far decided it's better to have him in here than outside the door howling.
Yeah.
But if
Yeah.
he lets one rip, I'll disappear from the screen real quickly and we'll go to plan B.
Yeah.
So
We
yeah,
saw Top Gun. We saw
I'm just hanging. I'm just being domestic.
All the fun you made when we were in Santa Fe and dog sitting, it's all coming back to you, Eric.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Eric, but you did have some time. I just want to quiz you. The FAA just a couple days ago rejected an airline's proposal to do what exactly?
Well, what's happening here is we all know there is quite a pilot shortage. There's never been one like this since World War II. Thanks to them cutting off Ron when he was still in his prime. And then the airlines foolishly dangling bait in front of guys like me to retire early, which I seized immediately. And nobody saw flying springing back so rapidly post-COVID. Everybody says, okay, that was last week. We're all ready to go. Where is everybody? Well, you just can't turn a battleship around that fast. So they're trying to keep everybody current and hire new people. And it's tough finding people with the right experience level. So one of the things the airlines, an airline threw out, Republic Airlines out of Indianapolis, I think, they are the parent owner of Frontier, right? Eric? I don't know that. I think
I'm pretty sure they own Frontier.
Okay, you're probably right. So they proposed to the FAA and said, hey, if we do an in-house training program well, let me back this up. Some years ago, prior to 2009, you could have a first officer, a new hire guy with just 250 hours total time and a commercial pilot certificate, and that was fine. And there was a crash that precipitated a congressional review, an FAA ruling saying, okay, the captain does not need to be carrying a new person and teaching them how to fly. That's when the team concept really started. These guys need to be of close to equal ability, if not equal experience, and team members. So they upped the requirements tremendously for the right seat person to essentially have the top rating in flying, the airline transport certificate. They required that the first officers have one of those too, and a specific rating for the aircraft. That requires 1,500 hours in general. There are ways to reduce that if you're a graduate of a military training program or an accredited college program, which takes significant review and time. You can reduce that sometimes to 1,000 hours, sometimes to 1,250 hours, depending if it's 4 years or 2 years. But those are a longer term gathering of knowledge and experience, whereas the airline was proposing, hey, we can put these people through this program and our program will be, quote unquote, as good as the military academy. Well, that was their argument, and certainly in their self-interest. And also, to put some sugar on it, they said, this will certainly help with the reduction of the pilot shortage. And my immediate thought was, yes, that will reduce the pilot shortage as if you went out into a hurricane and sneezed into it to get the flow to reverse. That's not going to reduce the pilot shortage for one company or for the regional. So the FAA denied this, and I agreed with their opinion, saying this would be a compromise in safety. But clearly, we have to find ways to open avenues for this high quality training to get people in the seats, make them able financially, otherwise help provide a pathway to get people into the seats, because we do have a horrible shortage. But the FAA said this is not the way out, and they denied the application.
And two things come to mind when I hear you talking about that. One is the airlines have had a program called Ab Initio, which is Latin for from the beginning, since probably the 90s, certainly by 2000, right? And probably the biggest affiliates were North Dakota University or University of North Dakota, and that program is down here in Arizona now, I believe, at least their remote site. And there were at least a couple others. So this is not a new proposal, but as Eric said, they came in and said we want to do it at a lower rate. And the other thing about it is the trends in the airlines. In terms of experience, like Eric said, no longer the airlines made a decision not to allow the airlines to reduce that down to 250 hours of complicated or complex time. And that had been kind of the evolution of, there were a couple of accidents, one with an airplane that crashed due to icing, and a couple of other airplanes where they found out that, some airlines, you could have a new captain. Now that captain might have been at the airline for 10 years and had a lot of experience prior to that time he got him in there. But when he upgrades into the left seat, that's a new role for him. And so they were pairing new captains with sometimes a new pilot at the airline. Again, both people highly experienced, but the combination together, the NTSB said that's not a good combination. So as a result of that, the airline well before the shortage ever came up, they said, if you got a new captain, you got to have somebody that's been in the first officer seat for quite a while. Or if you got a new first officer, you got to have a captain that's got some time in the seat. And that was so that trend about not cutting corners in terms of the experience level in the cockpit precedes all this stuff.
Exactly. When I checked out in my other airplanes, when I went from the 737 to the Airbus and then to the 757 and 767, when you first got on the airplane, and Ron probably remembers that, the company would designate you as a high minimums captain. Number one, you had to have an experienced first officer, and I can't remember the amount of time and seat he had to have. I think it was at least 100 hours. And we had weather minimum restrictions until we had 100 hours in the seat. We were restricted from the very lowest of the low instrument approaches. So and scheduling would not pair crews together like that did not meet those requirements. That's correct.
Explain just briefly, Eric, what weather minimums are and the restrictions.
When this never happens in Arizona, well, it actually does, but then everybody just runs and hides. But in places like Seattle and San Francisco and LA, where you occasionally have dense fog and restrictions to visibility, we have instrument approaches that have what we call lower than standard minimums. A standard minimum on an instrument landing system approach will be a half a mile slant range visibility and be able to have ground contact by 200 feet. And there are reductions in minimums down to zero ceiling and just 300 to 400 feet of runway visibility, such that you really cannot see the runway at all till you're on it. But the airplane autopilot or heads-up displays, the airplane's flyable into those conditions. We've talked about that on other shows. But when you're a brand new captain, the captain generally will be making those approaches with lower than standard weather minimums. And when you're a brand new captain, they will not allow you to do that until you have at least 100 hours, in general, 100 hours in the airplane before you can, what we call shooting an approach, make an instrument arrival with lower than those standard weather minimums of 200 foot ceiling and half a mile visibility.
And Eric mentioned the 200 foot ceiling and a half mile visibility. What that means is, as an airplane going down through that at 200 feet, they have to be able to see the landing environment. And now it can be the lights. It doesn't have to actually be the concrete then, but they have to be so confident that they know that they're landing on the runway. And what that means is, what would you say, maybe 10, 15 seconds, Eric, from the time you see it until you make contact with the hard surface?
Yeah, at the most. At the most.
And so that versus the quarter mile of viewing visibility out there, those are the things that make it really, really. That's what we used to joke. That's what you get paid for, because the rest of the time, not much requirement. And then as Eric said, when we got to the fully automated landings, now the role of the pilot Now we no longer had that restriction where we had to actually see the hard surface, but now we have to watch and we become cockpit managers. So, and both pilots are looking for sequence of lights, basically, that if you get this one, and if you don't get the next one in the right order, you immediately abort the landing and you go around and you either wait for it to improve or find out what was the problem, or you go to an alternate there. So those are all the things, and that's really what it comes down to when you say flying airplanes. It's really about, taking off in lower visibility is not near the question as it is coming around and landing. So
Sure.
Reminds me of my solo. I remember getting in the airplane through saying, well, anybody can take it off, Ron, but getting it on the ground is really what it's all about. So anyway.
And as you were saying, that what's the old saying? Smooth seas do not a sailor make.
Yeah.
Well,
So,
I just want to leave it to Jim to come up with this amazing piece of trivia. So apparently Republic Airways, their call sign is Brickyard, as in the Indianapolis 500. So I know that there's always innovation going on in the industry, and probably there could be improvements to the training, but it's always a safer bet if it comes like from a collective rather than just maybe a more financially guided decision, right? So
Well, they had to ask, and I was going to bring up David, I think Needleman, the founder of JetBlue, which is a very successful airline, and he founded an airline in Salt Lake City, Morris, that was very successful and eventually purchased/merged to Southwest. He at one time, when he was at JetBlue, petitioned the FAA saying, hey, we're flying this whole fleet of Airbus A320s, highly automated airplanes. How do you feel about us just flying those with only one pilot? Thinking, well, what if they said, yes, we got a 50% discount on those cash sucking morons, or we're rid of them, and half the whining, cut our whining in half instantly, we'll save a fortune. I might as well ask him. So he asked the FAA, and the FAA said, let us think about that for a moment, Mr. Needleman. No. So that was the end of that deal. No.
and Republic does in fact own Frontier Airlines. So,
Oh, okay.
I looked that one up too.
yeah. And I see they're partners with Indigo Airlines, whom I also wrote on over this last weekend with the segment going from Doha to Bengaluru was on Indigo, which is the equivalent of a like a Southwest. I won't say Southwest but the equivalent of some of the lower cost airlines that we have here. So interesting. Yeah. So okay. Any other questions, Dieter, or anything?
well, I do have one, actually a couple for Diane, but I think the one that stands out is or at least I'm the most curious about is what happens if someone gets sick on a flight? Like, what do you as a flight attendant, how do you deal with that? And sick is a very broad term, so maybe you can elucidate kind of like
Right.
yeah, how you would deal with the different types of.
Well, we have sort of a flow chart that we follow as far as talking to the passenger, assuming the passenger is conscious, to find out how they feel, what the problem is. We have to ask, of course, their name, if they're traveling with someone, if they're on medication, lots of those kinds of questions, because we have to document that, because we will have to submit a report when we land. Depending on the severity of the individual's symptoms, certainly if we ask, do you feel you need any medical attention? Do you need oxygen? Do you need all those other kind of stuff? So we go through all those kinds of things. We will, since on my aircraft, we have two flight attendants. One is usually the person who if you catch it, that's yours. So whoever notices it first or is brought to their attention will be dealing with the passenger. The other flight attendant will be running, if they need to bring something, water, another sick bag, something like that, they'll be the runner. They will also make an announcement. we have a passenger who has a medical condition or medical emergency, depends on the level. Do we have any medical personnel on board? I've never been on a plane where we did not have someone, nurse, doctor, firefighter, paramedic, someone.
Do you guys use midair?
We do not. We do not.
Do you have anybody that you use?
I'm not aware of anything that we don't do that. No. So we'll go through that. We'll make the announcement to ask for medical assistance. At that point, we will call the flight deck. We don't call the flight deck initially because we want to have a fuller understanding of what the situation is. There's no point in telling them, hey, listen, we've got somebody who's sick, but we don't know what their name is. We don't know what it is. We don't have a doctor on board. So we try to gather as much information and get enough resources first. And we're trying to do this quickly, obviously. And then we'll call the flight deck, let the captain know what the situation is. And as we get more information from the medical personnel or from the passenger, him or herself, then we obviously relay that again to the flight deck. And then as sort of a collaborative, make the decision, the captain will make the decision of when he calls ops or whoever he's calling to make the decision to land or to continue on to the destination. As we've talked about before, for in over nothing, then landing somewhere is to a tiny airport where there are no resources. All the rampers have gone home. The entire airport's closed. That's not going to help us. So, I mean, there's a lot of factors that go into that. If we have someone,
do you guys have AEDs on board?
Yes. Oh, yes. Every aircraft does. We have, and we go through that in training. We've talked about all the flight attendants have to go through CQ or recurrent training once a year. And so that's part of our training, CPR and the recurrent on using the AED. And so we have those. If we have a passenger who is unconscious, then there's a different flow chart, obviously, as far as resuscitation, that sort of thing. So we have biohazard kits. If we have someone who's very ill, who becomes physically ill, we have materials to deal with that. We have gloves and gowns and disinfecting things. We have special bags that we put bodily fluids in and bodily whatever. And so that's part of our training. So we do have a lot of resources that the passengers are not really, they don't see. It's just they're in special, in overhead bins when we have special medical equipment. That's part and parcel of the sorts of things we have, the AEDs, the special biohazard kits, and that sort of thing. So
second only to the airline or the airplane safety, the number one priority is your safety. If you're experiencing any kind of distress. And the main thing that the airline wants to know is what's the best outcome, what's the best plan for you. And it may not be even landing at your original destination, as Diane said. It depends on what time of the day is, what facilities they have, and what the problems are. So they end up with highly trained flight attendants in CPR and first aid, highly extensive first aid kits on board the airplane with the seal on them so that we can ensure that they haven't been stripped over the process. That's one of their pre-flight checks. And then if you're at an airline, all the mainline airplanes in fact use Medair, or there's another company, I think, Eric, but I don't know who it is because I've never heard of it.
And Physician on Call, POC.
Okay. But we know a lot more about MedLink because they are headquartered right here at St. Joe's Hospital. And what it is, it's a hot link to the ER. And so if you call up and Diane and gathers information with or without the help of a qualified medical personnel, like an EMT or something that might be on board, and it turns out to be cardio, then they're going to get a cardio person to come on the radio. And in the past, before satellite technology, it would be done through a patch through the pilots. Diane would give the information sheet to the pilots, then they would set up a phone patch and relay. Now, all the newer airplanes, particularly the ones that are transoceanic and long haul, they have a satellite phone that the flight attendants can go to directly. So
We have-
years
Yeah.
ago, I was going to say years ago, I think it was before the defibrillators. There was a thing that about the Seattle EMTs. 60 Minutes did a special, in fact, years ago, said if you're going to have a heart attack, have it in Seattle, because it was the best place to get care, even outside of being in your neighborhood or in your house like that. And I would say now, second only to that, maybe if you're going to have a medical problem, one of the best places to have it is on an airplane.
Or in the airport in general. It's true.
Yeah.
What I was going to say is we even have kits on our planes, and I suspect on all the other aircraft, that we as flight attendants are not even allowed to open. We only can, they only can be unsealed if we have a medical professional on board because of the materials inside. So they are so highly specialized that we cannot do that. So we have numerous levels of medical care available to us on the plane.
I'm glad Diane threw that in. It's exactly correct. They have a standard kit, and then they have the advanced medical kit or whatever it is that's, as she said, sealed, and only a licensed medical professional can open it. But I also want to throw out kudos to the licensed medical professionals, the paramedics, firefighters, nurses, doctors. In 32 whatever years, when we asked for help, I never ever was on a flight where we didn't have one or more volunteers immediately jump up to go help. And at one point, I remember when we resolved something satisfactorily, and the flight attendant said, "Eric, I was about to call you back and have you PA that we only need 8 guys. They're gonna kill us. We got too many. We only need 8 guys. Tell nobody else to get up. It's all good."
That's a problem I had in one of our medical emergencies. Is the same thing. We asked for medical assistance, and I had it seemed, I know it didn't happen, but it seemed like half the plane came forward. I'm like, whoa, please, we've already got, there's no more room. I have a little plane, and I have an ill passenger, another his traveling companion, me, another flight attendant, and 15 people, and everybody's got to get back. So yes, there's always someone. There is always someone on the plane to help.
Peter, do you have anything else? If not, I want to go to a couple of questions that I have that are hanging.
I do. I just I did put into the chat something that we will speak much more in depth about next week. It's our Fearful Flyer Airline Satisfaction Survey, and we kind of announced it last week a little bit. And basically what it is a collaboration between Ali Anderson, elite coaching student of ours, and us, coming up with a questionnaire survey where we ask you, if you as a fearful flyer were on a flight, let's say recently, you fill out that survey, but from a perspective of a fearful flyer. So just like you rate your Uber driver or you rate, other services, we kind of like came up with this a service in a way that ultimately will help, hopefully even change the industry if we really get enough traction with it. Do you want to say something about it, Ron?
Yeah. We're not interested in what you thought of reservations or marketing or the frequent flyer program. What we're interested in, what we wanted to become a source for this, is what was it like for somebody who's not a great flyer, who doesn't have a lot of experience or who has issues with flying. That's what we want to know. We want someplace that you can go and you can say, okay, this is the way they generally treat people who express the thing. We're not asking them to do anything extraordinary. We just want them to know that you guys are a force out there, and a much bigger force than any of the airlines would ever acknowledge. And right now, there's no programs in the U.S. That have any kind of identification with any major airlines, and the ones that even offshore over in Europe, we're down to 2 of them, I think now. Several of the others have stopped during the pandemic and have not rejoined in that. So that, and I want to give another shout out to Ali. Ali's just did a super job on this, and she's been a great resource, and I want to credit her with that. I touched on the beginning. We have a mechanism that we want you to stay involved and stay engaged with us. And the way it opened up to us is the monthly Clear for Takeoff 201 global online course monthly coaching sessions. And we do that. If you're enrolled in the 201, you get 60 days of access, and you get at least a couple of the online coaching webinars, because we realize for those of you who are taking the time to give yourself some special training, it really is a must that you have to ask questions and get a little bit more personal attention. So we're going to expand on that, and we're going to talk more about that down the road. But as a integral part of that, or follow-up to that, Ellie Ritchie, I believe she pronounces her last name, or ICCI Ritchie, is in the course. She was on the webinar last week, and because of my spontaneous flight to somewhere in the Middle East over the weekend, I was unable to with the combination of lack of internet, I was unable to respond to her. So I wanted to a couple of these. She's got several other questions. Ellie, I hear you. I responded once tonight as soon as I got internet there, and Eric gave me a mail on this. She says, you said that once the U.S. has strict rules on how safe planes are in this country, but what other countries? But what about other countries? I have to take a flight between two countries, and although it is a short flight, how safe would their airplanes be? I'm going to open this and say, basically, there's an organization that is akin to the FAA, and it's called the ICAO, International Civil Aviation Authority, and they help smooth all the rough edges between. First of all, it's an arm of the United Nations. They come together, they meet like the United Nations. They have representatives from all the participating countries, which is virtually everybody, including Russia and Ukraine, even though they're at odds with each other right now about flying in and out of other countries. They standardize the language. English is the the international language, and they basically have the same standards. They are just like the USA, and if you look at their records, their records are now have equaled ours when we were at the same place in our aviation history. So it's very standardized. I think what we'll do, Eric, we'll talk about this in the next coaching session, more about that. We'll get some more details, but anything you want to add to that about ICAO or anything?
No, that's very good. And as Ron brings it up, it's essentially a global FAA that everybody has agreed to and signed on to in order that they can continue to promote their business and travel and everything else. It's in their self-interest as well.
Between my trip to Europe in July and my trip over the weekend, I saw a couple of interesting anomalies. India, I'm sorry, the European country, they seem to be really big on the plastic bag with all your little cosmetic things in there and making sure that that's small. India, let me tell you, and you guys know how many electronic devices I carry with me, right? I got a portable office, electronic office here. They want to know every adapter. I had to unpack everything, dump out the bag, and show them every little plug that you plug your thing into, to power up your device and stuff like that. And it was quite interesting. And then the icing on the cake was when it came out of Doha today. They actually, a lot of them, even though you come in and you're still in a secure area, when you're coming in on Qatar Airways, for example, you come into a secure area and you never leave it. Even when we went out on the same airline, coming back to LA, whenever it was last night or this morning or whatever, they made us go through security again, but didn't, I was a little bit bummed. I bought a bottle of water to have with me. I mean, literally 15 minutes after I bought it, they took it from me, because we went through. And once you're in the boarding area, you're going to the gate or onto the jetway. You're not going to go have a stand to buy anything anymore. So I thought that was interesting. And they, generally speaking, the security in Qatar and India was very, very, very stringent. They took a longer look at everybody. So anyway, the last thing that I'll mention here for Ellie, and I'm going to talk to you personally, Ellie, as well. She downloaded the harmonizer, and when she took the 201 class, and she wanted to ask, how do you use that thing? Well, the first thing I'll say right now is that the instructions are in that. If you haven't if you purchased it before Dieter uploaded the on the website, and we have the app now that goes with it, you might want to take a look at that again. If you don't, let me know and we'll send you a new link to that. But basically, if you're flying within a month, you want to listen to that thing at night, in the morning, and it's 32 minutes. It's in its entirety. Every day, morning and night, before you get to your flight. And then during the day, if you have an anxiety attack or a panic attack, whatever, you want to put the thing on with the headset, listen to it, but you don't have to listen to the entire 2 minutes or 32 minutes. All you need to do is listen to it long enough until you feel your attention coming back under your control. Basically, you're getting so used to it that it bores you. Okay, it's like doing weight reps in a weight room. You just want to use it long enough until you can feel your attention come back under your control, because that's the issue. You know, when you get spooked, your attention gets hijacked and you no longer have it under your control. So I'll just stop right there for those couple of things. And the next, we're definitely gonna put those two items on the next monthly coaching webinar in October, and look for another exciting bit of information and offer about how you can attend each and every one of the coaching webinars if you want, or get the replay. Okay.
And
before it was restricted to the 201 students only. Okay.
I just wanted to say that the replay, because you may or may not be able to come on live, but you definitely also will have the access to the replays. But I also, just to finish this off, I know Don he's flying in a couple of months, so we're actually going to maybe go in a little bit more depth about what to do and how to prepare, so it's not last minute, either next week or in one of our coaching webinars, because that's where we really have the time, because we keep the webinar size, like the group, small enough so that it really can address your own unique personal situation, right? And that's the whole idea of group coaching. It allows for an interfacing and a connection, not just between us and you, but also between you as students on the webinar. And there's sometimes we do breakout rooms and other things to just really make it a lot more meaningful, a lot more real in that sense. But we will give a bit of a better outline of how to prepare with 2 months or 1 month, whatever it is.
And we've always prided ourselves on being practically oriented. It's for me, it's fun to read about the brain. It's fun to read about neuroscience and how it works and all that. But really, you guys don't want to do that. And not only do you not want to do it, you don't want to do it when you're not flying, because who wants to terrorize themselves when they don't have to? But what we know really is it's really important to do something when you're away from the airplane. And this actually starting in February with Allie, when Allie prepared for her flight, and it's another contribution she's making. We're looking at some very specific things, and I had an aha moment with Sai over this last couple of weeks on things, because no matter who you are, anticipatory anxiety is what gets people crazy. It doesn't matter whether it's triggered by the fears of the airplane not working or whether it's triggered by your fears of you not working. Doesn't matter. Anticipatory anxiety is what gets people crazy, makes them crazy, and makes them leave the airplane or not fly. So that's the focus that we're going to have. It's going to be the focus very intently in the next couple of months or so. If you haven't, join us. If you are with us, stay with us. Okay.
All right.
So. Ba-dum-bum.
So, and I bet you are ready to go to bed right now.
Yep. Say goodnight, Ron. So anyway, thanks to Dieter and Diane and Eric again, and all of you out there. We'll see you again next week for another episode of Fearless Flight Live. Have a great weekend.